at this gorgeous painting behind you, I can't help but to see like the flower of life and how you utilize sacred geometry within a lot of the compositions or structures and imagery within your work. And that's something that I've been like deeply interested in and just fascinated by for a long time. And so I figured that would be like a cool way for us to kind of get the ball rolling today. And I'm curious sort of like how you got into utilizing sacred geometry, discovering it, like what it kind of means to you and sort of how it plays a part in your process as an artist.
Yeah, so my work is the thing that has most interested me always is connection. And so for a long time, I was working with the ideas of micro and macro and the way different patterns in the universe are kind of connecting us, our bodies, everything in nature. And
Mm-hmm.
I saw some of these diagrams. I was working with the idea of cellular structures for a long time.
Yeah.
And I saw these diagrams of how the flower of life is very much like life itself, like
Yeah.
the cell and the egg, like reproducing and creating this beautiful form. And so that was really inspiring to me. And so the using the actual geometry in the work is a somewhat newer kind of development over the last couple of years. But the idea of the cell I've been working for a really long time. And so this
Mm.
is like kind of a structural way of putting that together. And even now I'm kind of like still working with the tension of like how to keep the organic as well as the geometric and like how
Yeah.
to like dance with those binaries.
Yeah. For sure. I mean, it is so fascinating, like how like the flower of life. And for those out there that aren't familiar with the flower of life, it's a really like ancient diagram. I mean, Da Vinci was playing with it, but we can see examples of it being utilized in cultures across the globe, across time. And so it is really interesting how it's like a two-dimensional representation of like cellular mitosis, of like how
Exactly.
cells split. And
Yeah.
so like when you look at like how an egg splits, after it's been after what's the word I'm looking for? It's been
Fertilized.
fertilized or
Yeah.
germinated, you know what I mean? It
Yeah.
splits and it splits in this exact form. And it's just so fascinating. And from it, you get this incredible matrix essentially that you can create all kinds of forms out of as well. But I think it's so beautiful the way that you are sort of like playing with this tension of like the geometric and the organic because they are united. They are like one thing, the kind of almost two aspects or expressions of it in some way. And
Right.
so like how do you approach like doing that in terms of like building out your composition? Like I'm just looking at the painting behind you and I see the flower of life pattern kind of like over your, I guess would be your right shoulder,
Yeah.
kind of building out in that space. But then you see these beautiful sort of undulating like wave patterns that are kind of more organic, kind of enveloping that space on top of it. Like, are you like having any sort of like formal sense of composition, or are you just kind of intuiting it as you piece these things together?
Well, for a while when I started to become interested in the geometries, the work went much more just kind of geometric for a little while as I was familiarizing myself with those shapes and how they work and the elegance of how to put them together, how to build them
Mm-hmm.
like, equilaterally and
Yeah.
all of that. So I had to kind of go there first, but there's a certain, prior to that, I was making a lot of work that was more like call and response or like create a move and then respond to that move. And there's so much experimentation in that I
Yeah.
absolutely adore and live for. And like that's what really like gets those kind of creative juices flowing for me.
Yeah, for sure.
So what I found with the geometry is like as elegant as it was like a little constricting, like
Mm-hmm.
so it's like now I've got to stay with it, like color within the line, so to speak, kind of like, because it's like
Yeah.
these forms. And so I started to really like over the last year think I would love to figure out a way to like kind of can they both coexist like
Mm-hmm.
visually, can I make
Yeah.
it work? And so with this most recent painting, I started with, just like doing some pours on the canvas and adding water and allowing those shapes to kind of emerge.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I and then I responded to that to see where, like how can I fit the geometry into this?
Yeah.
How can I get it to balance, both in terms of, composition as well as contrast, because it's
Yeah.
like you introduce geometry and it's like, bam, that's,
Yeah.
it's powerful. And so
Definitely.
it's like, how can both of these things
Hmm.
really work together and find that dance? And so this was the first painting where I really started to feel like, okay, now I'm kind of grooving with it.
Yeah, that's so exciting, Katie. Oh my God,
Yeah,
that's so exciting when you kind of like crack the code a little bit and figure
yeah,
out sort of like how, like, because what a lot of people out there, I mean, artists all know this, but people who maybe aren't like committed to any sort of creative practice, like it is a lot of just problem solving
right.
and a lot of visual problem solving, a lot of experimentation, and then once you kind of figure out some of those quirks about it, then you just like can let go and trust your intuition and play and flow once you've
Yeah.
kind of figured out how to do it. And I think if this is the first one that you've kind of opened up, I can't wait to see sort of like how it unfolds and evolves, because I do think that this relationship between that organic, expressive, sort of earthly quality that comes through is such an amazing balance to the structure of the geometry. Because I mean, that's really how I guess it kind of plays out in the cosmos. There is
That's
this underlying like mathematical structure. There is a sense of proportion, relationship. We think about just even like Fibonacci numbers and the spiral. We think also about, the flower of life, but from those structures, even like molecular structures, which are very specific, then we get like this sort of undulating patterns of the way water sort of flows through wetlands, or the way that sort of mushrooms kind of grow on a tree, or whatever. There's this organic, almost seemingly kind of playful creative process that happens, but underneath it, it's grounded in the very specific structure in a very specific sort of design, so to speak. When I first discovered sacred geometry, it just like blew my mind, because it does point to this fact of like there is an interrelatedness to all of life, and there is some kind of coherence underneath the surface of what seems incoherent or what seems chaotic. There
right.
is a structure there. It's mysterious as all hell, but like it's definitely there, and we can see it through geometry and math. And so
Right.
I find that to be just a really rich area to investigate, not only as an individual human being, but as an artist specifically, because we're dealing with these visual forms all the time.
Right. That's what I was going to say, especially as an artist. It's like this kind of original creation, or this creation that continues to happen and expand in our universe. It's so inspiring because
Hmm.
and then you are this little creator yourself and trying to like, find ways to structure this stuff. It's
Yeah.
super
It
exciting.
it is amazing. It's like the old alchemical saying, like as above, so below, as within, so without, like the micro, macro, like everything is a fractal, like self-referential sort of
Yeah.
explosive creative force of life. And it's in everywhere we look, everything we see, it's just all around us all the time. And I think sometimes that's part of what the role of an artist is to point out these things that we can totally overlook, or totally like, just pass off as being insignificant, and be like, no, look at this, this is the whole web of life right here. That's like
Right.
weaving all of us. We are all a connected entity that's like one thing, like almost like one sort of ecosystem. And we're all just kind of playing a part in like holding up the homeostasis in some way.
Totally. There's no better like feeling than if like a friend or somebody sends me some picture of something that was happening in nature and says like, "Oh, this reminds me of your art." Because
Hmm.
it's like if I can point one person
Yeah.
back to that, like what's happening
Hmm.
outside, it's then that's a success in my mind.
For sure, for sure. Because I think our culture is so keen on like creating a sense of like banality, and like things can be so mundane, or things can be feeling kind of insignificant. And I think part of our role, I guess, as artists, as creatives, is to sort of initiate people back into that curiosity and that sense of wonder, and that sense of like questioning in a feeling of like awe kind of questioning, but not like questioning in a state of fear or a state of like resistance, but a questioning like, what is this place? Like, what are we doing here? Like in a really beautiful, almost childlike way.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to get like caught up in just the practicalities of everyday living and
Yeah.
forget that we're spinning on a rock in the
Right.
middle of infinite space where all this beauty is surrounding us all the time, and there's so much mystery enveloping everything we do and look at. We can't forget it because
Right.
it's so in some paradox it's so easily forgotten, even though it's the most majestic, magical thing you could ever imagine. It's
Yeah.
mind-blowing where we
Yeah.
are.
And for myself, for my own process to like continuously be right, because we got to do the jobs and the
Yeah.
this, that. And it's like to get into that place, it's like
Mhm.
there's no greater like
Yeah.
moment space to tap into.
For sure. And you were mentioning, before we got online, how you had a really wonderful start to your day doing some yoga and meditation and I think this is something you and I both connect on because I think we both have done teacher training and are yoga teachers as well, and like really diving into that practice. And I find that to be such a deep well of inspiration for me to be able to like turn the light of consciousness inward and really do that inward journeying to not only like cultivate connection and openness and understanding of our own sense of self, but like then pulling that out and bringing that into relationship with all the things that we do.